Good evening. I know you're ready for this. Tonight, China wants a deal. Donald Trump says they'll have to stew with his tariffs just a little longer. It's been just another ordinary day, an ordinary Tuesday, really, at the White House. First, there was a warning from the International Monetary Fund. It says Mr. Trump's trade war will take a toll on the U.S. economy. Then political intrigue took over in what was seen as a surprise move. It really surprised a lot of people. Nikki Haley said she is resigning as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And finally, President Trump brought it all full circle again. As he met with Haley in the White House, he said he's at the ready, prepared to slap yet more tariffs on China.
We helped rebuild China. If we don't do that, China's not where they are right now. And that's fine with me, but we're not doing it any longer.
You promised more tariffs on China if they retaliate.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Are you going to go forward with that?
100%. If they do that, if they retaliate, what does retaliate mean? They've already retaliated. They've taken out $500 billion. I think that's the ultimate retaliation. Now, look, China wants to make a deal, and I say they're not ready yet. I just say they're not ready yet. And we've canceled a couple of meetings because I just say they're not ready to make a deal.
Okay, you get the picture there. Not ready yet. Our Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. Our Claire Sebastian is with us here in New York. Jeremy, I go first to you. A surprise, yet another one from the White House. Nikki Haley saying that she's going to resign at the end of the year. And yet, if you're her, if you put yourself in her position, this is a pretty shrewd political move at this point.
You know, it is interesting. The timing of this announcement has had a lot of heads scratching, frankly, at the White House. First of all, because a number of senior White House officials were not looped in until this morning, just an hour or so before Nikki Haley stepped into the Oval Office with the president to deliver this announcement that she is resigning at the end of the year. She did, however, come to the White House last Wednesday. She was meeting with the president, and that's when I'm told she told the president of her intention to resign from her post. And it was kept very, very closely held right up until today. A rare feat in this White House, which is, of course, notorious for leaking, as you well know, Paula. But questions now is, what will Nikki Haley do next? She signaled in her letter that she plans to return, or not to return, but to head over to the private sector and perhaps make some money for her family. Sources have been telling us that that was perhaps a consideration in this move. But the timing is notable also because last week, of course, the president had this moment with Judge Kavanaugh. The day before Nikki Haley met in the Oval Office with the president was when the president had mocked Dr. Christine Blasey Ford at that rally. Our understanding was that they wanted to hold off on it at least throughout last week so that Justice Kavanaugh could get confirmed and not to overshadow that announcement. But a lot of questions still remain as to why exactly now. A lot of the thinking inside the White House had been that if Nikki Haley was going to resign, it would perhaps be after something on which she disagreed with the president, something on which the president stepped out and took a position that she really could not support. But here we're seeing something very different. She insisted it was not for personal reasons, but merely because she had put in nearly 2 years in this administration, and she felt it was time to leave.
Yeah, and certainly she was effusive in her praise there, sitting next to the president. I mean, as Jeremy just explained, that was the political intrigue, Claire. But what was top of mind for everyone during that meeting was the issue with China, the IMF weighing in and saying, look, this will hurt growth, not just in China, but in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, the IMF made itself extremely clear today. This read not just like a report on the numbers, Paula, but essentially like a rallying cry. They're saying that global growth could be trimmed this year from an original forecast of 3.9% to 3.7%. Now, that's not a disaster. It's the same that we saw last year. It's the highest since 2011. But this is a plateau, essentially. This shows that it could meaningfully slow as a result of these trade tensions. And that's because they say not only are we going to see direct impacts on the countries involved, but indirect impacts on supply chains around the world and on confidence, on business sentiment, on financial market sentiment, on all of those things that play into it.
In terms of what the IMF is saying, you know, they keep saying it's like preaching to people who are no longer listening. They say the world will be a much poorer and more dangerous place with this kind of protectionism. Did they feel as if, never mind the Trump administration, as if they're speaking to the rest of the world here and just saying, don't take the bait. If we get into this as a real trade war, we will be in trouble on global growth?
I think probably that was part of the messaging as well. They actually took the unusual step of modeling what would happen if all of the president's threats on tariffs, you know, another 267 billion of Chinese goods, tariffs on autos, and all the retaliation that comes with that. And they said if all of that came into play, that could cut about a percentage point from global growth, and that could extend into the long term. So I think, you know, we've got a situation where emerging markets are struggling. We've got problems in Europe. These countries can't afford to have yet more, you know, trouble in their economies. So I think that's part of what the IMF was saying.
Yeah, and Jeremy, every time when we're at the White House these days, when he's getting off of an airplane, on an airplane, he talks a lot about this whole theme. In one of the speeches when he was announcing the new trade agreement with Mexico and Canada last week, he said, look, stop being babies about tariffs. Is there any doubt in your mind that the president will go through with these other tariffs on China?
No, it certainly seems so. And frankly, the deal that he was able to strike between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, this NAFTA 2.0, frankly, that has emboldened the president, because you heard him immediately after that deal was signed touting the fact that his tariffs were exactly what had led to the success of being able to broker that agreement. And he lamented the babies who had complained. Those babies, of course, most of the Republican leadership in Congress who had complained about the president's tariffs, saying that it was the wrong way to proceed. But frankly, because the president was able to get that deal with Canada and Mexico using those brinksmanship tactics, I think it makes it all the more likely that the president is going to continue to stay the course, to continue to up the ante with China, because clearly he thinks those tactics will ultimately succeed. The question, though, is China the same, is dealing with China the same as dealing with Canada and Mexico? Clearly, the stakes right now appear to be much higher.
Yeah, definitely. At least that's what the IMF is saying. Our Jeremy Diamond there at the White House for us, and our Claire Sebastian here in New York. Good to see you. Now, later in the